Welcome to Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Pitcher. The same training techniques used by baseball world's back-to-back-to-back AAU national championship teams. Teams that have set national records for earned run average, strikeouts, and less walks per inning than any national team for a 3-year period. Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Pitcher was developed by professional scout and instructor Tommy Nansky, an internationally recognized instructor currently working with many professional athletes in both the American and National Leagues. Coach Nansky's diligent study of the Major League Pitcher has produced a no-doubt revolutionary approach to training. Now, let's get started as Coach Nansky explains the basic concept of our pitching training program.
All right, guys, I want to welcome you today and thank you for coming out to Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Pitcher. We're going to go through all the mechanics today of pitchers, and we're using major leaguers as our example. And there's a good reason for that. There's only 28 major league teams in the world and about 10 pitchers on each one. So you're talking about only 280 men in the entire world make their living pitching Major League Baseball. So we got to believe they're doing a lot of things right. So what I've done for you today is done an awful lot of study and a lot of film sequences and things like that, and spent a lot of time letting you know what are the mechanical things that they do. Now, here's the first one of our guys. I want to give you an example, and here's a Major League pitcher with the Padres, and we kind of look at him. And Tripp, what do you kind of notice about him? What kind of impression do you get by looking at him?
He looks real relaxed and confident.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a gunslinger, don't he? That's one thing I noticed about these guys, and I have a lot of respect for them. And I'll tell you, to go out there with the pressure there is in modern-day baseball, and they just kind of give you that look. Maybe he's kind of nervous with ESPN and 50,000 people in the stands, but you'd never know it. And that kind of bothers those hitters a little bit when you have that look in there. Another thing, even if you do get a good hit or a home run off those guys and a couple runs score, you notice they never really, very seldom show any emotion. They kind of keep themselves under control, so they're kind of what I call kind of a gunslinger effect. So a lot of you guys have come to class today, and I want to kind of let you know what to expect in class. What we're going to do in teaching the mechanics of the Major League pitcher, we're not going to show you out in the field this afternoon or in our photos 8 different ways to throw a curveball or 4 different ways to throw a slider. Or we're not going to get into all those kind of triple knuckleballs or any of that kind of stuff today. The purpose of today's presentation is to develop a sound, mechanical, efficient delivery, okay, what we call anatomically sound. Now, what are the benefits of that? Well, basically, you're talking 3 main things you can get out of that format, okay? Number 1, we're going to improve our control. Something pretty important, and I'll go into the magnitude of that in a second. Number 2, you're going to increase your velocity, and I know you all like that. You're going to be picking up a little more pop on your fastball. And number 3, maybe even more important than the first 2, you're going to keep a sound, healthy arm. And that's something that's real important. You get hung up on throwing these curveballs and these things at this age, you're going to have some troubles later on down the line. So now you know the purposes of the things. I want to share something with you that an old instructor told me years ago. A fellow by the name of John Asmer, who pitched a lot of professional baseball. And John sat down with me one day, and I had a lot of respect for the man. And he says, "Tom, come here a second. I see you're working hard with the pitchers, and I see you're putting a lot of hard work and time in." He says, "But I want to have you sit down here, and I want to explain to you what the best pitch in baseball is." Well, when I heard that, I was pretty excited from a man of his magnitude's taking time to talk to me. So I sat down, and I was expecting to hear it was some type of a triple grip on the ball or would do something. And I was all excited. And he says, "The best pitch in baseball is strike 1." And I kind of thought for a second, and I'm saying, strike 1? What's he talking about here? And he said, "Well, let me explain to you what the magnitude of that is." He said, "Do you know, if you get the first pitch over the plate, the entire Major League system hits 230, actually 228 to be technical. 228 batting average, as we know, is not that all impressive." He says, "Now, if you don't get the first pitch over the plate, the statistics show the whole league hits 280 against you." And I thought about that. So having the control to place the ball and stay ahead of the hitters is paramount. So we're talking about a confident aura there, where they look like the gunslinger effects. They have the good sound mechanical delivery. And you got the purpose of the tape today. So now I'm going to go into lesson 1, and we're going to start to talk about the actual mechanics of the Major League pitcher. You guys ready to get going with that?
Yeah.
All right, good.
In review, remember the best pitch in baseball is strike 1. And Coach Nansky believes it's more important for aspiring pitchers to focus on a sound, fundamental delivery than to possess an assortment of pitches. Remember, the proper mechanics are vitally important, as they improve velocity, provide better control, and promote a healthier arm. Now, let's go on to Lesson 1, as the 45-degree transfer step is discussed.
All right, we're ready to start with Lesson 1. It's what we call the 45-degree transfer step. Paul, if you look at this picture of the Major Leaguer, he's doing something different that he did not do in the first shot, in the confident aura shot. You notice anything?
It looks like he's stepping a little bit to the side instead of straight back.
Yeah, he really is. He is stepping at what we call a 45-degree angle, and he's transferring his weight to his back leg. And what that does, it allows to free up this pivot foot so he can pick it up and make the turn. It's just as simple as that. Let's look at another Major League player right here, and this is kind of a neat 45-degree transfer step. Look at that one. Is that even a better example, you think, in the first? Yeah, you can really see it. There's no doubt about it that he's stepping off to a 45-degree. And look at the direction of his belly button and his shoulders and this stuff. It's kind of going over at this angle rather than straight at the hitter we hear a lot. Well, here's another shot. Here we have a pitcher from the Atlanta Braves, and he's starting as he steps. And you can also see there a little bit of 45-degree transfer step. Now let me tell you what that does, and let me jump ahead just a little bit. Okay, as you transfer, we all know we make that pivot, and then we lift our leg and we kind of load up when we pitch. Okay, now we have done studies to show after you go ahead and transfer, pivot, and lift and load, your body turns 110 degrees to get to a good, what we call a lift and load position. Now we're going to go into that later in the tape. Now just think about it for a second. If you stepped straight back, which some instructors teach, you would now have to turn a whole 110 degrees, and it's very tough for you to control your body. In fact, I'm going to show a clip right now of Paul, our young 11-year-old, doing this. He's going to step right back, and you notice as he does it, he shows a little bit of balance problem. Now, if we allow him to step 45 degrees and make his pivot, you notice how he gets a real balanced lift and load position. Now, I don't know if anybody's thinking, why would that be? Well, it's simple as can be. When they go ahead and take the 45-degree step and transfer it, you've cut a total of 45 degrees off of the turn, which means you only had to rotate your body 65 degrees. You only got to rotate your body 65 degrees, and it's a lot easier motion to do. In fact, most Major League players actually do that. They do take the 45 rather than stepping straight back. Very interesting. And what's the other thing that it does for us? Okay, besides cut down the degree of turn, we've discovered it puts the weight onto the back foot, and that allows us to toe the rubber and make the pivot, and that's going to be our next lesson coming right up.
In review of Lesson 1, by stepping back at a 45-degree angle, we can actually cut down the degrees of rotation required to reach the lift and load position. By stepping straight back, 110 degrees of rotation would be required. With the 45-degree transfer step, only 65 degrees is needed. This promotes better body control and balance. Also note, as we step back at 45 degrees, we free up the front foot, making it easier to pivot. Now let's go to Lesson 2, as the pivot is discussed in detail.
Okay guys, we're ready for lesson number 2, and this is what we call the pivot. And it's also going to be one of the stages you're going to do when we get outdoors today in our drill. Robbie, you can go ahead and look at this photo right now. It's a little further along. What do you notice about him right now? Is there anything different that you've noticed from the other couple of pictures?
Looks like he picked his foot up and turned it sideways and is looking down.
Exactly. That's the two critical things that have happened different from the first time. We notice right now that the foot has turned or made a pivot, and we notice that he's looking down. Okay, great. Very good, Robbie. Let's look at another Major League pitcher, and if we look at this photo right here, you see it, Trip? You guys see right there? What do you notice? Same type of thing. You see him looking down, and you see that the foot has made the turn, or what we call a pivot. All right, now just for discussions, I want you to see one more right now. And here's a ball player with the AAA level, guy a step away from the major leagues. And if you look at him, there's a major difference that he's doing right there, is that as he's starting to pick his foot up and pivot, he's not. He's looking straight ahead at the target. All right, now a lot of coaches get all concerned over that, and there's a lot of debate whether as you pivoting, now remember, so for continuity purposes, our first thing was we 45 transferred. That took our weight off our pivot foot, allowing us to pick it up and turn it, okay? And we're going to go on to picking up our target. Some players are looking down, some aren't. Now let's discuss that. The reason, I believe, is that as the pitcher starts to pivot, you're stepping down off that rubber just a little bit. And I think it's just natural sometimes to look down to see what your feet are doing there so you don't trip yourself up. Now, there are some coaches or a school of thought that believe, well, when you're looking down like that, you can get some type of a concentration of what you want to do further on in the cycle. My research has shown the only time the major leaguers in general always pick up the target is after they reach the lift and load position. So remember that, because I'm going to be talking to you about that later. All right, so again, we notice that the players are going ahead and they're picking their foot up and turning it and pivoting. Nothing more than that. Some look down because of the little step down they're going to make there. No big deal. And I urge you, don't get hung up in it. For my personal opinion, with you young guys, as you go ahead and make your pivot, it's a good idea if you want to sight your target at that time, but it's something that's not to get hung up on whether it's either really good or bad. I'm just sharing with you information that a lot of times it's done both ways. Now, the crucial thing is, after we pivoted, we're going to reach another position, which I'm going to talk about in lesson number 3, and that's going to be called the lift and load.
Remember, the pivot is the vehicle that takes the pitcher from a relaxed, comfortable stance to the lift and load position, the focus of our next lesson.
All right, guys, now we're ready for lesson 3, and this is what we call the lift and load position. And I want to show you a photo here, Brian, and this question will direct at you. And do you notice anything different? It's another sequence of events going on. What do you notice there?
It looks like he's picking up his leg and he's starting to pick up the target.
All right, so you notice right there that he's now looking at the target. Now, we noticed in the pivot, sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. But we're noticing now as they're starting to lift and load, you notice that front leg is starting to lift up. We know that he's picking up his target. This is a young minor leaguer that I saw in the Florida State League, and he's on the way up. He's a pitcher with a major league organization, and he looks like he has some pretty good solid mechanics. Now, I also have some other real neat shots here that I'd like to share with you. And I think this one here is really a great shot. I think we're real fortunate to have taken that shot. It's just excellent. And if you notice, there's Mr. Olson. It's kind of a neat little shot. And you notice right now there's something happening. Brian, can you tell me anything about what you see going on right there at the front foot?
Well, his toe is pointed up and his knee is lined up with his back knee.
All right, so you see the front knee is kind of lined up with the back knee. Matt, you notice anything about...
Yeah, his left knee is above the waist.
Left knee is above the waist. No doubt about it. Dwayne, you see anything in there?
His shoulder's not pointed right at the plate.
Okay, right. His shoulder's not right at the plate. And you've heard that a lot, haven't you? Yeah, always have your shoulder pointed at the plate. Well, if you did that, guys, you wouldn't get that loading of the hip. Actually, what's happening right now, you see how his hips are kind of getting cocked there? And what's that doing? It's storing energy. Anything else you notice, Tripp? Do you see anything right there?
Well, he's starting to look at the target now.
Yeah, he's starting to look at the target. He has a real good head and eye position, okay? And you see that in not just one major league pitcher. Paul, here's another guy. What do you notice about that picture?
Well, he has very little flexion in his back knee.
Right, again. What do you notice, Robbie?
His foot's pointed up.
His foot's pointed up again, so we're starting to see some similarities there. Matthew, what do you notice?
The knee's above the waist.
We're noticing that. What else? Or something else we're missing that he's doing? Yeah, Brian?
The knees are lined up.
The knees are lined up. There's something I see right now we haven't hit on. One more point. You got to get it. Robbie?
His shoulders aren't straight across.
That was said. One more thing.
Picking up the target.
Picking up the target. Right. He's getting his eyes looking at the target. And we're starting to see that. Here's a lefty, Greg Swindell. We notice. What do you guys notice again?
Same thing.
You see the same thing. Okay. Now you're wondering, why are all these guys pitching basically the same way? Well, that's because anatomically, that's how your body functions. Major league players, as we talked early, do things correctly. Okay? They do things the most efficiently possible, and that's why they're major leaguers. So what you're seeing these gentlemen demonstrate for you today is the most efficient way to pivot, to gather energy, to load, and we're going to show you in a moment how they're going to unload the energy to make it into a pitch. So the first thing we had to do to get some velocity and control and all that is we have to do what? Anybody sharp can figure that out? What do you got to do?
Load.
You got to load up. You got to get some energy. Almost like if you had a shotgun. What do you do if you're going to go out and use it and go hunting?
Load.
You're going to load it up. Doesn't do too much good if it doesn't have any energy. And that's what he's doing. He's loading up. All the energy is stored. And now we're going to talk about in our next lesson what's going to happen to all this energy and how it gets transformed into a good pitch at the plate.
The lift and load position is an extremely important position for the pitcher, as it is here that he stores or loads his energy. From here, he'll transfer the stored energy into the momentum needed for a dynamic delivery. Notice, in the lift and load position, our pitchers have little flexion in the rear leg, and the knees are knee to knee in alignment, and the front knee is above the waist. Also, notice the hips and shoulders are rotated approximately 20 degrees beyond the hitter, creating the stored energy. Now, let's continue with teaching the mechanics of the Major League pitcher and move on to Lesson 4, as our Baseball World students learn to increase the flexion in the back knee and glide.
All right, guys, we're ready to go into Lesson 4, and let's do a quick review and let us know where we're at. The first step was taking a 45-degree transfer step. We pivoted. We lifted and loaded to gather energy. And I want you to notice something's different happening right now, Brian. This position looks a lot like the lift and load, but something different's happening now. Can you see it?
It looks like he's increasing the flexion in his back knee.
Sure does. It looks like he's increasing the flexion in the back knee. And if you look at that, that just means it's getting a little more bend in there. Okay, now it's very important because when that happens, the body will automatically start to glide forward. Remember, when the knee was erect on the back knee, it had very little flexion, you were able, with the knees lined up, to be able to stay right there in a real good balance position. But right now, as he increases that flexion in the back knee and sits a little bit right there, you're noticing that he starts to glide a little bit forward. He's going to start in a second. Well, let's look at another Major League player right here, and you notice there he is. And if you notice, it's the same thing. His shoulders and everything is very similar to how we were in the lift and load, but you notice that the flexion is increasing in the back knee. All right, a couple similarities there, and you'll see that in a lot of good Major League pitchers. Well, here's another photo. Here's a pitcher right now who's a pitching coach of the year. He's retired from pitching. He pitched in many games through AA, AAA, and was an All-American in college, and even pitched in the major leagues for the Kansas City Royals and some other clubs. And you'll notice right there, this fellow's name is Derek Botello, and he's now the one of the pitching coaches for the Philadelphia Phillies organization, and a friend of mine. In fact, I used to coach Derek years ago. And you'll notice as he's going through his delivery, you notice he's increasing the flexion in the back knee. Now, basically, what happens, guys, when you increase the flexion in that back leg, your body will start to glide forward. It's just going to start to glide forward, and I'm going to explain to you in the next lesson where this gliding action, increasing the flexion and gliding, will take the accomplished Major League pitcher. About ready for that one? Yeah. All right, great.
By increasing the flexion in the back knee, the professional pitchers avoid rushing or opening up too fast. This increased flexion and gliding technique allows them to remain in control during this critical phase of the delivery. We've just seen how the players start to unload the stored energy. In Lesson 5, we'll see where the increased flexion and glide techniques take the accomplished professional pitcher.
All right, guys, now we're ready for Lesson number 5. Again, as we do, we always review. We were in our confident order on the mound. We 45-degree transfer stepped, right? We made the pivot. We lifted and loaded, and then what did we do? We increased the flexion in our back leg and started to glide. Now here's something that's very important. I have a great shot with you that I'd like to share with you today. Here's a great pitcher in the major leagues. Hopefully it's Mr. Worrell, and you look at that right now, and you're noticing some things. Obviously the inflection has really increased in the back leg, and you notice as he glided out forward, what do you notice about his arms right here, Matt? There's something different that's occurring.
He has extension.
He has extension in both his arms. That's right. He has extension in both arms. And he also has the flexion in his elbows. That means his elbows have a little bend to it. And another thing I noticed that a lot of Major League players do is he has the glove taking a picture from behind. We talk about if there was a camera in his glove, he would be able to see behind him. So it's the camera seeing behind, it's flexion in both the elbow joints. You know the eyes are focused in and locked in on his target at this point in time. And you notice his body's still closed off towards third base. And what I mean by that is you don't see it opening yet. You still see his foot's pointing towards third. And that's a real critical position, and we call that the power position, That's the best position to throw the ball from. And what's happening, guys, is he glided forward, okay? And I'll show you another Major League player who has now reached an excellent power position. And you notice right there that he's relatively closed up with third base. You notice that he has extension in both the arms, and his head and eyes are level. His fingers are on top of the ball, and you notice how they're kind of loose there. Okay, guys, so let me explain to you what happened. After you gathered and stored the energy, okay, and that was in our lift and load position, you increased the flexion in the back leg, which allowed you to glide out, correct? It allows you to glide out. It took you to the power position where all these neat things are happening. And this is simply the most efficient position to throw a baseball from. Now, I want you to, this is kind of complicated. It's a couple terms of physics, and it only is going to hurt for a minute. So I want you to try to learn, as he started to glide with the back knee forward, he's gaining momentum. He gained momentum, and momentum is a linear force. And I know that sounds complicated, but it just means it's a straight line force. So in other words, as he's gliding, gaining momentum, it's a straight line force. We don't see any type of a turn action has ever happened here at any point in time. Can you all notice that? And that's very, 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 very important. You all heard to drive off the rubber? Not true. If you drive early, what would happen? Well, you never would have had time to get extension in your arms, and you would have short-armed. And that meant your arm would have had to take a real quick cycle to catch up. Or another thing that would have happened real bad if you drove early, rather than what? Glided. Your body would have started to open too soon, and then you heard the term, he's rushing, or he's dragging his arm through. That would all be caused by a pitcher driving off the rubber early. He didn't. He increased the flexion in his back leg, and he glided out. And that's very good. Now, there is going to be a thing happening in our next lesson that's called the dynamic energy change, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. You guys up for that?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
As we reach the power position, we notice that the professional pitcher has obtained extension in both arms with flexion in the elbows and fingers on top of the ball. His glove hand is taking a picture from behind as if he had a camera in it. His body is still closed and facing toward the third base side of the infield. Notice the drive off the back leg has not yet begun, as engaging the hips too early would cause him to open up too soon or rush. In addition, at this point, all accomplished professionals have established eye contact with the target. In our next lesson, we'll see how the power position changes from a momentum-gaining linear force to a rotational force through a dynamic energy change.
All right, guys, things are going real great. And again, we always have a review each lesson, and the body and the mind learn by repetition. And a lot of what you learn, I believe a study's been done, 80% of it is visual. And that's why I'm just not talking to you guys. I'm always showing you pictures to reinforce our points. And I think that's something that's really good that Baseball World does. So in our first lesson, we went ahead and had a 45-degree transfer. We went ahead and we pivoted. Then what did we do? We lifted and loaded and stored energy. We increased flexion, and we glided out to the power position. So in a logical step-by-step sequence, we showed you this last picture of Mr. Worrell, and we used that as our power position photo. And now I'm going to show you the next picture in the sequence, okay, or the kinetic chain, which just means step-by-step, step-by-step. And you notice something different's happening now, Dwayne, than happened in the photo to my left. What does the photo on my right show any different?
Looks like his front foot's opening towards the plate.
It looks like the front foot is opening towards the plate. There's no doubt about it. You notice the position in the glove, guys? What do you notice about the glove? It looks like that glove is starting to pull in more towards his body in the right photo. And you notice the ball is getting up around his ear height as his toe is just starting to touch the ground. And you also notice his toe is starting to face the plate now. So he's making some type of an energy change. We talked about momentum and linear force, which was what, a forward force towards the plate? Well, we don't see that happening. What kind of force looks like taking place now, Dwayne?
Looks like a rotary force.
Exactly what's happening. He's starting to do what we call, at Baseball World, a dynamic energy change. And everybody's going, wow, what's that? Well, it's just that the energy was changing from a forward linear motion to a rotary motion. So why did it start linear to start with? Well, we gained momentum. We got things going so that when we make the rotation, it's going to be very quick and very quick rotary aggressive action. If he just started in that power position we talked about from a dead stop and tried to throw, it'd be all right, but he would never have the velocity of gaining some momentum as he rolled into that. All right, well, you might say, well, is that the only pitcher you got, Coach, that does that type of thing? Well, let's take a look at another pitcher right here. This is Jimmy Key, New York Yankee pitcher, real good, promising lefty. And you notice his toes just starting to touch the ground. You also notice that the ball's up around the ear, which we saw in our other photos. You also notice his head and eyes are focusing in on the target, too, and we're starting to see a lot of that, right? Now is the critical area. When do they all start looking at the target for sure? Everybody, It was just about everybody for sure is when they lifted and loaded, okay? Then they increased the flexion, they glided, they reached the power position, and now they're starting to go to a rotary action, okay? Here's another photo. I believe here's Mr. Abbott, okay, another accomplished Major League pitcher. You notice the ball's up around the air. He's starting to look in at the target. And you notice right now that his foot has started to open and his body is kind of in a rotary change, going to a rotary type action. You got to remember, he is not going simply forward, he's now going into a rotary action. And at this point in time, guys, I want you to look at the back knee, and you'll notice something here. The back knee, if you look, is starting to rotate. And what's happening is, this time we're driving for the first time. We glided in to our power position. And then two things that are happening to help us rotate. What are the two things? Very briefly, the back side, which is the hips, is pushing the knee in. And what's helping it? The front arm is pulling in, what we call a pull position. So two things are starting to happen to help the rotation. The back side's pushing and the front side's pulling. And that's what I call a dynamic energy change. Well, I was at a clinic once and somebody said, gee, you did a real great talk for us on pitching, but can you get a youngster to do this? And I thought that was a real good question, and we're going to show you a couple photos of our students. And here's a gentleman right now, one of our younger students. His name is Jonathan McDonald. He's now a high school player and has corrected all these problems. When he first came to us, he was starting to do something a little bit different than the other players. And you notice he is starting to drive a little early, and his front shoulder's getting pulled out, and his fingers are kind of under the ball. Coaches, you'll see this a lot with the amateur players at all levels. You notice his fingers are kind of under the ball, and he's kind of catapulting the ball, and his shoulders are open. And this is what we call flying open, and he's also getting into a short arm cycle. If you look at our Major League players again, you notice at this point in time their fingers are on top of the ball rather than under the ball, something we want to look for as coaches. We also notice, here's another young player. His name is Chris Raleigh. This is back in our fall league a few years back. This boy is only 12 years old. You notice he was starting to get everything right on line. Do you notice how the glove is taking a picture from behind? You notice that his knee is rotated, which means what? His hips have kicked in. And now you see, even though he's kind of closed up front, you see the front side start to come around. So that, for a youngster of 11 to 12 years of age, is getting to be a real good sound mechanical position. And when you do this, what are the benefits? Well, we talked about them. Improved control, improved velocity, and a healthy arm. Pretty good deal for getting the right mechanics. And we're going to show you later on out in the field how we're going to break these down step by step drills, okay, without a ball until your body gets used to it. What you're learning here in class is memory here where you'll see it, but your body still remembers to do a different thing. So I'm going to show you in some real neat drills you'll get excited about exactly how we learn. So we're going to get into another position right now in our next lesson. I know you guys are getting excited about this, and we're going to show you what happens right when we get on the release. You guys ready for that one? Yeah. All right, sounds good. Fun to learn, isn't it?
In this lesson, we learned the linear force momentum changed into a rotational force, helping to create the elements of a dynamic delivery. In Lesson 7, we see where all this energy is channeled.
All right, guys, we're moving along real good in our tape right now, and let's quickly review our step cycle we always like to do. We started with the 45-degree transfer step. 2, we made a nice pivot. 3, we lifted and loaded and gathered energy, right? We stored up energy and loaded. We increased the flexion in our back knee and we glided out to the power position. Then we found out in our last lesson something was happening, and that was when the back side was kicking in. And we noticed in a quick review that we noticed that when the back knee is turning in, that's actually the hips coming into play. That's when our hips go to work. And we saw the major leaguers like Mr. Worrell again as they started to pivot and the front foot started to open. And this is the actual starting throwing of the actual throwing cycle that occurs. And that brings us right now to our next lesson, which is release of the ball. And obviously this is the payoff. If all the good mechanical sequences are in the right order, the release is going to be right on, and it's going to be, everything's going to be timed up, and that's when you get the explosive fastball, the good control, the good rhythm, and we talked about, and the healthy arm. All right, well, let's look at release. There is some controversy in baseball and all that, and here we have a great picture right here. Here's another Atlanta Brave, and there's some key things. If you notice, the back knee has totally rotated now. You can see his logo on the front where he's facing straight ahead. The glove is pulled up right into the heart. Can anybody notice any other thing that's happening right there that's different from their other photos? Anything's different about the release? Something that you've heard different?
His shoulders aren't level.
Yeah, exactly. His shoulders aren't level. And I hear that a lot. In fact, there's a guy has a tape out and they say, well, keep your shoulders and keep your elbow equal with the shoulder. Well, you got to remember, you aren't an elephant. And an elephant has its throwing thing right in the middle, right? An elephant would have to keep its shoulders level. If it tilted, the elephant would be making some bad throws or have to throw sidearm. I say that jokingly. But human beings, our arms are not in the middle of us. They're off to the side. So the only way I could throw the ball straight, in other words, if I wanted to throw the ball to the camera with everything level, it would be way over to camera left. If I have a tilt, if you notice, now is the only time I'm on line. And people become uncomfortable with that sometimes. What we notice, that elbow is right up around the ear level. We notice that the glove pulled into the heart, and that's what helped us help that dynamic energy. Remember, Dwayne? As the back sides start to push, the front side pulled, and that forces our elbow up, and we're in a real dynamic leverage position. Well, let's look at another Major League pitcher and say, well, maybe that's just that one fella. Okay, well, here's another guy. I think everybody knows who this guy is, right? There it is, the Rocket, one of the guys with one of the best controls and fastballs in the game. And you notice that his glove is what? Pulling right up into the heart, and this is a position we call the pull. And you notice his elbow is up by above his ear, and he's also does he have real nice level shoulders there, Robbie?
No.
No, you can see they're not level, and that's something a lot of us haven't heard before. We compared the two fellows side by side, and we see some similarities. Also, there's some controversy of where is the ball released. I've heard people talk about back in here or whatever. Well, we're talking about elbow up above the ear, up here. The shoulders are a little tilted, which gets us in line. And let's take another picture. And I hope you guys enjoy these pictures. They're just real solid, good shots, and really, really done well, I think. I'm real happy with our staff. And you notice that the ball is being released out in front, out in front. So we're seeing some dynamic things happen on the release. Okay, now, we've let go of the ball. The ball's on its way. Next step is coming up is real important, and we're going to discuss that in our next lesson, and that lesson is going to be called the hip roll. And I'm getting ready to show you that in a minute.
Remember, the ball was released out in front with our shoulders and eyes not level. The techniques taught in this tape are employed not only by today's professionals. Let's take a look at a photograph of a great Major League star taken over 25 years ago, Bob Gibson. Notice the 45-degree transfer, a classic power position. Extension in the arms with flexion in the elbows. The glove takes a picture from behind, the fingers on top of the ball. The body is closed toward the third base side of the infield, and the back knee is not yet rotating, indicating he has not yet engaged the hips. And a dynamic rotary energy change to release. Now, we learn in our final lesson, in order to keep in a proper kinetic chain and stay in a predictable sequence, the importance of the hip roll and bowing action of the neck.
Things are going real well, and we've got through all our steps. We've released the ball now. Now, there's something that also has to happen I want you guys to become familiar with. And here's a Major League pitcher, another Padre, and this is a real nice, solid photo. You notice that he's pulling his glove into the heart, and the ball's on its way. It's kind of a nice shot, but there's something starting to happen with his back leg. Okay, I want you to look at that, and look at the next shot in sequence, and I think you're going to get kind of excited to see something's happening. Can anybody notice what's happening? Dwayne, do you see anything happening there between the two shots?
His hips have come around.
Yeah, his hips or his whole legs kind of coming around. So he actually throws the ball, okay, as it releases, and then as he follows through here right now, you're noticing his hips are coming along with them. And that's what we call a hip roll, And it's very important because we want your hips to have a nice flow as they come through. This is what's called a follow through. You also can look at his neck, and you can see his neck's fighting to stay back in there. A lot of times when a youngster will follow through, they'll kind of look down or have their momentum carry away. We want you to kind of bow that neck back in there. There's a couple reasons for that. You want to be able to see the release of the ball coming off the bat. Here's another young minor leaguer we've been following through, throughout our tape, and he is following through. You'll notice that his leg is starting to come around and follow through. He's not pulling his glove up into his heart as well as some of the other Major League players, and that's something that his coaching staff will pick up and I'm sure correct. So again, I enjoyed making this presentation to you guys this afternoon. We've gone through all the phases of pitching, so we know it now in our minds, and I'm sure if we study in our tapes, and we're going to have a pretty good idea in our mind. But I want you to remember, you're not going to go out to the ball game tonight and have all these good mechanics. The way you get that is to go to our step-by-step building block approach and do these steps without a ball, just step by step by step, and I'll help you with that in the drills. And then your body's going to get used to it. We'll go to another step. We'll give you a ball, let you throw into a big tarp, and we won't worry about control at that time. We're not going to be worrying if you're throwing strikes just yet. We're worrying more on the mechanical sequences in the events that they occur, okay? And this is what we call muscle memory. After we get that down pat, then we have a device just called a Strike Pro, where we're going to throw with all our steps and make sure we have good control. And once we can make sure we're throwing strikes at a consistent level, we're going to go ahead out to the mound and go through our drills from then. So you guys have been great listeners today. You've been good students, and we're going to go ahead and get ready to go out to class and go outside and try our drills in action through our 6-step drill. You guys up for that?
Yeah.
All right, great.
Remember, it's important to hip roll, as it helps release the stress from our shoulder area. Pitchers who fail to hip roll effectively decelerate, causing undue wear and tear on the shoulder. The bowing of the neck is vitally important, as it allows the pitcher to maintain eye contact with the plate. We've just completed the classroom section of teaching the mechanics of the Major League pitcher. Now, let's go to Coach Nansky and two of our aspiring students, Brian and Paul, whom you attended class with today, for an on-the-field review.
Okay, we just came out of class where we went through all the important steps of a Major League windup. As we talked about, we use the building block approach where we break it down in step-by-step little pieces. I'm here right now with Paul and with Brian, and they are two Youth League students that are going to go through the different drills. The first step, if you remember from class, was the 45-degree transfer, and they're going to give that a shot right now. Guys, ready to go? 45 transfer. Boom. You notice what they have done. Their weight now is back on the back leg on both the youngsters. And what that does, it frees up the pivot foot at this time so it can simply pivot. Now the boys are going through the building blocks, and we're going to go ahead. Notice how right now they haven't taken their gloves over their head at this point in time. And we like this method because it's just less movement. All right, Paul and Brian, let's go ahead and do our step 2, which is pivot. Great. They have now started to make their pivot. They picked their foot up and they've laid it down. And now they're going to do the very important step that we talked about in class, which is lift and load. Go ahead, guys. Let's lift and load. Good job. They're following directions real well. And you notice right now they're staying real good on balance and staying solid. When a lot of the youngsters first start this, they have a lot of trouble with not being able to hold this position. And actually, literally, they can hold this for minutes. In review, remember our first step was the 45-degree transfer step, and all that did was get our weight back to our back leg, which enabled us to pivot. Our step 2 was the pivot, and then we went to an important phase where we gathered the energy, and that's what we call lift and load. So let's go ahead, guys, real quick in a review. Just 45 transfer for me. Nice job, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and pivot. Nice job. Let's lift and load. Great. Lift and load is good job. We notice with Paul, he has his knee aligned with his back knee, and his front knee is over his waist at that point. He's in a very good energy gathering position. You notice that his shoulder at this point is not pointing at the target. It has a little bit of load almost towards the opposite coaching box, and this is what it's done, is cocked his hips. You notice also in his back knee, it doesn't have hardly any flexion at all, and this is what he's learned in class. The next step he's going to do is to increase the flexion in his back knee and glide. So Paul, increase the flexion in your back knee and glide out. Okay? You notice he's done the real good power position that we showed you in the tape. If he had a camera in his glove, he's taking picture behind. He has flexion in both elbows. He has looseness in his arms, very similar to what Todd Worrell looked like earlier in our tape. The next movement he's going to take is going to be a real critical one, where he's actually going to go ahead and start his backside. So Paul starts his backside right here, and now he's at a point, as we talked about in the tape, where we're going to have what we call a dynamic energy change. Now, if this was a real game right now, the mound would have a slope to it, and Paul's front foot would not have been on the ground yet. It would still be in the air. However, that would be impossible to simulate without putting someone like up in a harness or something. But this is the way we get close to assimilate it as possible in a drill. But if this was a real game, remember at this point in time, his foot would not have landed. Now he's still closed up in relationship to the plate, but at this point in time, this is when we're going to drive off the rubber and what we call a dynamic energy change, and that is starting the backside. Go ahead and start it, and Paul's done that real well. And now we're going to have an explosion point where Paul is going to go ahead and we're just going to yell, pull! And boom, he's gone through. You notice that he's followed through real nice. He has the neck bow where he's forcing himself back on the target. You notice that he pulled his glove up into his body, and he has rolled his hip towards the plate. He's just done a real good job. Okay, guys, set up one time again. Let's go through this kind of, we'll see both the guys here. Let's go through our steps and we get an idea what this looks like. Guys did a real good job, and let's follow the steps and the commands of 45-degree transfer, which is step 1. Step 2 is pivot. Lift and load and gather our energy. 3, increase flexion in the back knee and glide out. Okay, I'm going to start the back knee, start the back leg. Actually, what's happening, the back knee is not starting. It's actually his hips that are turning. And now he's going to go ahead and pull. Hip roll and looking at the target, and he's done a great job. One more time, real quick. Let's try it again. This is our 6 steps, okay? And we're going to start off with 45-degree transfer. Again, in review, what they've done, if you look at their belly button and their body, they've cut a lot of the degrees down. If they step straight back, let's try it again. Go back to setup. Now step straight back. Okay, now pivot. Now lift and load. You notice how Paul got off balance when he did that, and he had a swing. That was because his legs swung around. Let's try it again, showing you why Baseball World uses the 45-degree transfer step. All right, 45 transfer. Now you notice his belly button's not pointed at the plate. He's cut 45 degrees. So rather than having to turn 110 degrees if he steps straight back to load, Paul only has to turn now 65 degrees. And that's the advantage of the 45 transfer. All right, let's go ahead and pivot. Good, they've made their pivot, and the transfer means to put the weight on the back leg so the pivot foot's freed up, which they've done a real nice job. Now here comes a real critical point to store or gather energy, and that's going to be our lift and load. The leg is lifted and it's loaded up, and you notice both the boys have their toes pointed up. They have pretty good balance, little flexion in the back leg. Let's increase the flexion and glide out to a power position, and you notice right now both the gentlemen have their gloves taking a picture from behind. They have nice flexibility in the elbows, they're loose in their arms, and they're in a good position. Now at this point, everything has been a gathering of energy, and then it was a linear motion. Now they flowed out of, once they gathered their energy in the lift and load, they stored energy, they released it by gaining momentum forward, which is a linear force meeting straight. Now at this point, the critical thing happens in pitching, and it's what we call a dynamic energy change. It's going to change from a linear force to a rotary, and that starts with the hips kicking in, or what we call rotate the back knee in, and then we're going to go ahead and change to the rotary action is now started, and we're going to go ahead and pull, and the body rotated and the ball flew out of the center, and they've done a real good job. Okay, guys, we got a real treat for you guys today. We have Eddie Taubensee, who's a catcher with the Houston Astros, coming in to make our catching tape today, and he was observing you guys going through your drills. Eddie, this is Brian, and this is Paul.
How you guys doing?
What was your impressions of the 6-step method the guys were going through?
Well, I'm very impressed with that 6-step method. It's very simple. I'm very impressed with the lift and load method, how they're able to get up to that position and stay up there and balanced.
Yeah, that's something they just didn't do right away. When they first start with it, they struggle, but we found after a few hours they tend to really get with their balance, and we noticed their velocity increased, and they seem to have a lot of a better control. Isn't it true as a catcher, you guys are responsible for keeping your eye on the mechanics of your pitcher a lot, aren't you?
Yeah, not only we're calling the game, you know, we have to see the actions of the pitcher out there on the field. You know, if they're doing something wrong, we have to go out there, call timeout, and tell them the adjustment they have to make, and we have to see everything out there.
Well, your opinion of like that little 6 steps they go through, if they kept doing that, would that be the type of mechanics you'd like to see out of your pitchers?
Oh, I think there's a perfect mechanics. It's very simple. You can cut through the steps, you know, one at a time. Cut it down as simple as possible, and, you know, work on each one if you have trouble with it.
Great. All right, guys, so it looks like you're on the right track, huh? Yeah, great.
We just discussed the correct mechanics in the sequence in which they occur, both in class and in the field. Now, let's see how Baseball World's instructors use the building block approach to training. We first have the students go through each step of the proper mechanics in a slowed-down, non-reactionary approach to training without the ball. Without the ball, the players must concentrate on the proper mechanics. Without the worry of control, the focus is on the mechanics. Once the players have mastered the proper delivery mechanics to the coach's satisfaction, we suggest moving on to the tarp drill with a ball. Here, the steps are executed without a pause. We now use a fluid motion throwing the ball into the tarp. Since the tarp is a wide area, the students can concentrate on their form without worrying about control at this point. Through our studies, we found that when students are concerned only with control, they often revert to their old methods rather than the focus of their new delivery techniques. After our instructors feel the student has a sound mental picture and physical feel of the proper pitching techniques through both the 6-step drill and the tarp drill, it's time for a test of his abilities in the strike zone drill. Baseball World's 1991 AAU 13-year-old team, operating on the same 60-foot 6-inch throwing distance as Major League pitchers, have set records, walking less batters that year than several Major League ball clubs over a 10-game period. Our students routinely show an 80% accuracy rate of the strike zone as they master the proper techniques. Although Paul and Brian initially made the 6-step no-ball drill look simple earlier in this tape, they, as all our students, regardless of age and ability levels, struggle with the 45-degree transfer, pivot, and lift and load initially. But after a few days of drills, they learn the feel and they show improvement. Remember now, it's classroom first for the correct mental picture. Slow down building blocks with our 6-step no-ball drill. With the tarp drill, we gain the rhythmic feel of the professional pitching delivery. Then, on to accuracy once we've mastered the correct mechanics. Finally, we move out to the mound to put it all together. This method is proven to be very successful with all our staff and students. Thank you for purchasing Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Pitcher. Don't be afraid to keep records of your pitcher's control patterns. Remember, these techniques have been proven to help our students have a healthy arm, good control, and improved velocity. Please contact Baseball World at 1-800-833-1551 for information on summer super camps, to set up a clinic in your area, and to order our other exciting videos on hitting, catching, defensive drills, and dynamic practice organization for $29.95 each. Be sure to ask for special package prices. Best wishes and thank you from the staff at Baseball World.